Population 1.67 billion, economic growth 7.1% over the last decade, inter-regional trade standing at a little more than 5%, and of course, inter-regional investment a little less than 1% of the overall investment in the region. This is South Asia. Welcome to South Asian, a show on every third Friday of the month hosted by Nagorik, where we're going to discuss how to differ or agree, how to celebrate or bicker over issues in the region of South Asia. Today is the first program, and in studio today we have with us Sanjay Katuria, lead economist of World Bank in Trade based in DC, and Professor Mustafizur Rahman, Distinguished Fellow of Center for Policy Dialogue, a leading think tank in Bangladesh. Thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would actually like to begin with Sanjay. Sanjay has launched already, right, a report on South Asia, and the title is A Glass Half Full. My question to Sanjay is, why are you not perceiving the glass to be half empty? Why are you such an optimist?
Thank you, Rubana, and congratulations to you and your channel, TV channel, Nagorik, for doing this. I think it's a laudable venture for South Asia, probably the first of its kind. And the South Asian without spaces, I think it's fantastic. And why am I, and the rest of my colleagues, why are we such optimists? Well, I think this takes time. Integration, especially coming from the history that South Asia has, like the European Union, which took a very long time after the coal and steel community came into being, and that led progressively into what now we have the European Union. South Asia similarly is a work in progress. Trade, at least in absolute terms, is growing, although not in relative terms. But it is a fast-growing region. Therefore, the costs of not working with each other are actually growing because the space for intra-regional trade is also growing. I think we hope the positive message that we are carrying comes from the fact that the work that we do and other institutions in the region like CPD do, that over time we hope that this will persuade policymakers in the region more and more. Obviously, we're trying currently, but it is a power of continued activity on the intellectual front, supplemented by projects which demonstrate the real benefits of cooperating, which is very evident, for example, in the power space already in South Asia. So I think it is something that will grow, and the costs of inaction today are growing, and that comes through especially on climate change and disaster risk management. If the region does not cooperate, then the costs to the population become very high.
Thank you. Professor Mustafiz.
Thank you for having us. This is the first program, so congratulations. I think that over the coming months and years, this program will be able to contribute to deepening South Asian cooperation, advancing the interests of our people, and also addressing the concerns of our people. I'm an optimist. I share the sentiment that Sanjay has just expressed, because I think that, and I like the title of the book, A Glass Half Full, because many years back someone told me that you can look at it as the glass half full or half empty. If you are pouring, then it is half full. If you are drinking, then it is half empty. So we are pouring into South Asian cooperation. So it's half
collectively.
Full. Collectively, and it will be full someday, I hope. I'll give you two examples why I'm an optimist. You see, World Bank publication very rightly points out that currently the South Asian inter-regional trade is $23 billion, and it can go up to $67 billion. The second estimate that I take is that Bangladesh Nepal trade cost is 259, and Bangladesh Brazil trade cost is 148. So I think that there I see the potential that there is, if we can have greater connectivity, if we can reduce the cost of doing business, then obviously this potential can be realized.
Professor Mustafiz is mentioning Bangladesh, Nepal. What about India, Pakistan, Sanjay? I think it's in your report as well.
Yes.
What is actually between the NTBs, the non-tariff barriers, or the trust deficit that basically brings in the hiccups in the policies? Would you want to elaborate there?
Sure. So India-Pakistan trade is a case of missed opportunities. I mean, the actual trade as recorded in the official statistics is about 2 billion, roughly. The studies done in South Asia and ICRIA and others by Nisha Taneja and many others and Brief have documented that what they have actually found through in-depth interviews, it's about 3 times that if you include informal trade routed via third countries, via Dubai and mostly through Dubai, but also informal trade. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, even if you include that. Our study finds that the biggest deficit in trade possibilities, which is not surprising, so from current 2 billion, it is about 15-fold more than what currently exists. And that's because these are 2 large economies sitting next to each other, and they're trading very little. So, yes, so one of the most glaring things you can say is the Wagah border, which is the most obvious point of trading, right? So only 138 commodities are allowed to be exported from India to Pakistan via the Wagah border. The rest comes via Karachi. If it's not on the sensitive list, if it's on the sensitive list or whatever list, then it goes through Dubai, stamped as made in some other country. And you find those products in Pakistan. And vice versa. There is a lot of demand for many sharp Pakistani products in India, which again are not traded easily. So there is a huge, trust deficit between the 2 countries. And that's why what we are advocating is the power of trade to actually engender, create, or help to reduce that deficit, create interdependencies between the countries and between the people, and then create constituencies which will push the business community, as you would well know, coming from business, that create that strong community that will push the governments towards deepening. So it's a virtuous circle of trade and interdependency that we are really pushing for, founded in hardcore economics, not founded in some idealistic notion, although laudatory though that is, but that's not part of my job at least. But it's founded in hardcore economics, that there is a huge welfare loss to the people of both countries and to the rest of the region, to the extent that, as Mustafiz said, the trade in the region is 1/3 of its potential, and even that is only static. If one starts taking dynamic possibilities into account, then the sky is the limit.
Professor Mustafiz, what about India, Bangladesh?
Exactly. I was coming to that. If I take bilateral trade between our 2 countries, India and Bangladesh, the current trade is about $6.5 billion, and as the report says, the potential is $16 billion, and that can also enhance. India imports about $450 billion every year, and Bangladesh is exporting less than $700 million, so less than $1 billion. So I think that the potential is really great. What we have to do is that, you see, trade connectivity is really the outcome of some other connectivities. Transport connectivity, investment connectivity, logistics connectivity, trade facilitation connectivity, energy connectivity. So I think that if we can do the rest of the things, trade will follow. For example, in the context of the bilateral trade, a large part of our trade now is in the sensitive list. If you take, for example, imports of Bangladesh under SAFTA, 45% of our imports are under sensitive list. So I think that gradually doing away with the sensitive list should be seen as a major issue. And then also some of the para tariffs which we have to gradually decrease these at least, but taking into cognizance our strategic trade interest, obviously. We have revenue concerns, we have our domestic industry protection concerns, but we will have to, if we really want to deepen our South Asian cooperation, particularly with India, which I see that if Bangladesh has to move in the 21st century, we will have to have very close collaboration in South Asia and also with China. So I think that if we can gradually eliminate the sensitive list, if we can reduce the para-tariffs, and of course the non-tariff barriers, the elephant in the room, and these are really, you export ready-made garments and you face countervailing duties, you face various other, some people who are exporting food items, and so
it's difficult to export
it's
to
difficult,
India.
yes.
That's
It's
the
not
reality.
easy.
It's not easy.
But we will also have to look forward. India has now gone for the GST. So it will now, India is now a customs union in a proper sense of the word. So I think that those state taxes and some of those other non-tariff barriers will have been removed in future. And also, see, some of the initiatives that we are taking in terms of trade facilitation, particularly 70% of our export with India is through land and through Benapole, particularly land border, although there are others. So we are now going for interoperability of the system, single window, so that the borders are not control points, they are crossing points. We have the BBIN motor vehicle agreement, so we will be able to avoid those loading, unloading at the no man's land, etc. Because this is why really the cost of exporting and importing with Nepal is 1.5 times that of Brazil. So if we can remove those, I think then it will be on the basis of comparative advantages. And then really Bangladesh can, but we will have to do our own homework, because at the end of the day, if we don't produce, we don't export. So I think investment cooperation is also very important. It's good that we are now giving 2 of our special economic zones to India for dedicated investment. So Indian investment in Bangladesh, exporting to India, taking advantage of the zero tariff that India has given. So I think that is a very virtuous cycle that we can really depend on. And if we can realize that, I'm hopeful that in 5 years, I think, as I was mentioning, that if we can really have at least 1% of Indian market, we are talking about $4.5 billion. So that's the potential that we should target.
Well, Sanjay, in his report, has been very hopeful about 2 instances. One is border huts. He said that it's a great opportunity. Another is air collaboration. Mm-hmm. Would you want to expand that a little bit for our viewers?
Sure. So yeah, so I think we have documented in the report the barriers. There is as Mustafi said, the non-tariff barriers, as well as the tariff and para-tariff barriers, which are. And I mean, I would like to just mention a point there that, as he said, is that imports are actually, from an exporting community point of view, if there is a tax on imports, it's actually a tax on exports, as you would know. So that's the kind of mindset that needs to come into policy making. Then we have counted these 2 positive experiences. So there is very high costs of connectivity, as Mustafi said, in South Asia, and the examples are all over. India-Pakistan, next door neighbors. India-Brazil cost trade is cheaper than India-Pakistan, which is mind-boggling when you think about it. So Pakistan is situated somewhere in the Antarctic when it comes to trade. Literally speaking, not literally speaking, but actually that's how it seems to a trader, right? So these 2. High costs of connectivity as well as a trust deficit. These are the other 2 things that we focused on in the book, apart from tariff and non-tariff barriers. Now, we have gone into 2 positive examples in this space, in the connectivity as well as trust. In the case of connectivity, we've documented the very positive experience of India-Sri Lanka air connectivity, which starting with gradual liberalization starting in 2003. And then an episode in 2011. These together led to a very positive impact on India-Sri Lanka air connectivity.
How many flights are there in between?
So currently now, there are 147 flights a week between India and Sri Lanka. India-Bangladesh, with Bangladesh being a much larger country, still in about the 60s, as far as I remember, in terms of flights per week. So Sri Lanka, so that thanks to that liberalization episodes, they have very positive impact on flights per week, capacity, pricing, and tourism. and cargo. So India is now, since 2005, became the #1 source of tourists to Sri Lanka and remains to this day. So there are very strong positive experience that the rest of the region can learn from in that particular bilateral episode. And I think we've documented with very rigorous evidence that it had a positive impact. Now, the Border Heart story is very interesting.
Can we get to your Border Heart story right after the break?
Sure.
Okay, so let's take a break. Back from the break and over to Sanjay again about the Border Hearts.
Thank you very much, Rubana, and thank you for letting us start there with a very positive aspect of trade, which is relating to trust. Trust sort of underpins everything that is done, and as I said earlier, trade is something that can enhance trust. So the governments of India and Bangladesh a few years ago began to look back at the relationships that used to exist. And they started an initiative called Border Hearts, which is really weekly markets, informally, but in a very regulated space. They happen between people of the two communities.
How many?
There are 4 currently Border Hearts in operation on the Tripura border with Bangladesh and the Meghalaya border.
And 2 more are planned, right?
6 more are planned,
more,
but 4 are in full-fledged operation, and 2 more are very quickly happening, and 4 others are coming up. So these are, I've been to Border Hearts myself. I've seen the very positive power of Border Hearts to actually influence. I've seen people from both sides of the border meeting, families split, mothers and daughters weeping as they meet in the border. The actual volume of trade that takes place is very, very small compared to the actual India-Bangladesh trade. And
but the spirit.
It's the spirit. It's the spirit. And we documented with very optimistic projections of Border Hearts, growth and so on. It will be at best less than 1% of formal India-Bangladesh trade. So the mandarins in the commerce ministries of the two countries need not worry that this is going to take over formal trade. This is not about trade. This is about trade and trust. And this is about people-to-people contact and sort of relationship building. And it helps livelihood of people at the border. All stakeholders are helped. And also, of course, their views of each other are very positive. That has been documented. And so I unambiguously actually advocate and would say to both governments that please expand as soon as possible. And why restrict it to India, Bangladesh? Let's try to do it in the rest of the region as well. There is also something happening on the India-Myanmar border, for example. And I would say that this is something that deserves replication as far as possible. As long as trade is constrained, as it is in much of the region, then at least this is some way to have positive relationship building through trade.
Yeah. I think the ministries need not be concerned because I think there's a limit also of $200.
Yeah, it's $200,
so it cannot exceed
50 vendors, and it can be expanded.
It's
but as Sanjay has very rightly mentioned, even if we have 10 border hearts, it can hardly be more than 1% of the total bilateral trade. But the trust thing is very important. I read somewhere that if goods don't cross borders, troops will. So I think that this trust building is very important. And but I would like to add that, yes, Sanjay has very rightly mentioned about air connectivity. But I think that there are other connectivities also going on, very important. Rail connectivity, you have seen just recently, Bangladesh is restoring pre-1965 rail connectivities with India. And then there are new lines are also being created. Then we are having the BBIN motor vehicle agreement. 8 routes have been identified.
Historic BBIN.
Yeah. Yes. So I think that if we can do that, then the cost of moving goods from one place to another, particularly in the BBIN sub-region, will be drastically reduced. And then, obviously, apart from exporting or importing from outside of the region, we can also import, we will be importing from within the region. But I think South Asian cooperation has also another broader dimension, which is that if we can build up the production networks and regional value chains, then we can also connect with ASEAN markets. South Asian countries are now just have started the lower middle income journey. Many of the ASEAN countries, they are now trying to get out of the middle income trap, the so-called. So if we can have, if we can leverage and have a synergies with respect to the investment and trade that we can build between these regions by building the production hubs and production networks within our countries, we can really then have mutually, reinforcing cooperation with ASEAN as well.
To make it simple for the viewers as well, I think what Mustafiz is trying to say is, if we take fabric from India and if we do the production in Bangladesh, the garment production, I'm just talking about garments, it just naturally comes to me. And then if we export, can we have this kind of regional collaboration? Because we lack in backward linkage. If India comes forward and supports us with that, and if we have JVs, could we take regional trade collaboration to the next level? Do you think it's a possibility?
Absolutely. I think this is a very important part of what Mustafiz said, is that, so eventually you have to have exportable products. So you can have all the trade facilitation in the world and free markets and open markets, but if you don't have products to sell, then there's not going to be any, so at least in terms of exports from the smaller countries in South Asia back to the larger countries like Pakistan or India. So what can be done? So I think, yes, so one is the aspect of bringing in technology through foreign investment from large sophisticated countries like, Asian countries, India, China, Korea, Japan, I think are from a Bangladeshi point of view, these are the major countries which should be targeted. And I think Bangladesh is doing that for attracting foreign investment. And foreign investment is very closely linked to what Mustafiz said, is the value chains, regional value chains. They are, it's almost like a one-on-one. So there has to be a very extremely hospitable environment for allowing foreign investment in. And then Bangladesh will find that it is not merely that 90% of its exports are in one sector, in garments, that there are so many intermediate products on which it could get good at, and then spawn these regional value chains in all kinds of different product lines. It could be in automotive components, it could be in ceramics, it could be components of bicycles, so many different areas, as long as, so the foreign direct investment, very good trade facilitation, so that in and out trade. So for regional value chains, as we know, in and out trade has to be seamless. So duties in, duties out, all of that has to be perfect and seamless. And then we will enter an era of cooperation that so far we have really not tapped, except to some extent in the apparel value chain.
On that note, we'll have to conclude now. So thank you very much, both of you, for having been here. One thing, I think we've reached a consensus on one point, and there's a huge trust deficit in the region. So viewers, while we have this trust deficit, let us also not forget that South Asia is a region which comes together in music, in sports, and many other areas. Thus, there is reason to believe in South Asia. Thank you for watching South Asian, and we hope that you'll be here with us every third Friday of the month.